In 1972, a rocket was launched into space, carrying information about the human race. Fast forward to the present day, Neil Clarke is being celebrated for the success of his novel. However, the event soon descends into chaos, as it is overrun by a large number of dogs. Just as the situation becomes increasingly absurd, it is revealed that the entire scenario was merely a dream. Neil's peaceful life is soon interrupted when his neighbor, Fiona, complains about his barking dog. She threatens to report him, citing the no pets clause in his lease. Meanwhile, Neil harbors a secret crush on his other neighbor, Catherine. In an attempt to get her attention, he awkwardly tries to flirt with her, but his efforts are unsuccessful, leaving him feeling more embarrassed than before. The probe, having departed from the solar system, is intercepted by a group of aliens. As they examine the contents, they laugh at the message within, which reads, "We come in peace." Amused, the aliens take the drawings of humans included in the probe and place them alongside other such artifacts they have collected from across the universe. The aliens begin to wonder aloud why humans consistently depict themselves without clothing. As they deliberate, the aliens decide that Earth, as a whole, has shown itself to be unworthy of preservation. They announce a destruction order for the planet. However, they agree to grant Earthlings a chance to prove their worthiness, giving them one final opportunity to redeem themselves before the impending judgment. Catherine, disheartened by her unsatisfactory job, finds herself in tears in a quiet grocery store. Neil overhears her sobs and, eager to cheer her up, tries to make her laugh with a series of poorly timed and awkward jokes. Unfortunately, Catherine, clearly unimpressed, walks away. Meanwhile, the aliens announce that one random human will be chosen to receive the ability to do absolutely anything. This individual will be granted unimaginable power, a gift that could change the course of humanity's fate. Neil is randomly chosen to receive immense power. While cycling, he is struck by a small truck and falls. In the same moment, the aliens grant him the ability to do anything. Frustrated, he swears at the driver, inadvertently causing the driver to collapse. Neil arrives late to work and is confronted by the headmaster. At lunch, his friend Ray asks what he would do if he could do anything. Neil, still unaware of the full extent of his newfound power, casually replies that he would make Dennis, his dog, regurgitate his notes from Chapter 3. Neil's casual remark activates his newfound power, and the dog regurgitates the notes from Chapter 3. Ray asks if Neil could make something impossible happen. Neil responds with, "Intact." The regurgitated notes are now perfectly intact. Ray just wants for his crush, who despises him, to worship him. Ray, curious, asks Neil if he could do something to make his life easier. Without thinking, Neil wishes for an alien spaceship to destroy his class, inadvertently causing the deaths of all the students. Later at home, Neil watches in shock as a news telecast reports the devastating incident, realizing the unintended consequences of his reckless wish. In a state of confusion, Neil wishes for the dog mess to clean itself. To his astonishment, the dog poop begins moving on its own, heading toward the bathroom. In utter disbelief, Neil watches as the poop flushes itself down the toilet. Frantically trying to process what's happening, he takes a drink in shock only to notice his intact notes on the floor. In his stunned state, Neil accidentally spills his whiskey bottle. On impulse, he wishes for the spilled whiskey to return to the bottle, and to his amazement, it does. Then he wishes for the whiskey bottle to transform into a single malt. As he watches, the bottle seemingly hops across the floor and exits the house, leaving Neil even more bewildered. Neil chases after the bottle, but when he arrives at the shop, he finds it closed. To his astonishment, the bottle breaks through the door, triggering the alarm. In the ensuing chaos, a policeman catches Neil, but Dennis comes to the rescue, biting the cop and allowing Neil to escape. However, his freedom is short-lived, as he is quickly apprehended again. In an attempt to escape his troubles, Neil wishes himself to be home, eating with Dennis. He finds himself sitting down to a bowl of dog food. In a moment of desperation, he wishes for everyone who has died to be alive again. Suddenly, the dead begin to rise as zombies surrounding Neil's house. Panicked by the consequences, he quickly undoes his last wish and wishes for the explosion at the school to never have happened. Neil finds himself back at lunch, moments before the explosion occurs, as if the disastrous events never happened. Meanwhile, at Catherine's job, an author is being interviewed by her boss. As the interview unfolds, Catherine faces harassment from her stalker, but her colleague steps in to defend her. Back at school, Neil, eager to regain control, wishes for his class to become a model class. To his amazement, he watches as all his students begin reading quietly and attentively. Later, Neil wishes for his headmaster to be nicer to him, and for Ray's crush, Miss Pringle, to worship Ray. After work, feeling emboldened by his powers, Neil wishes to become the President of the United States. Almost immediately, secret agents arrive to escort him, and as they drive away, people begin shooting at the car. The secret agents debrief Neil about the various global issues, detailing the immense responsibilities that come with his new position. Overwhelmed by the gravity of it all, Neil wishes to return to his old life, finding himself back at home. Later that night, he wishes to be able to see Catherine downstairs. Miraculously, the roof between their apartments disappears, allowing them both to see each other. Neil wishes to no longer be able to see Catherine, only to find that he has gone blind. Realizing the mistake, he quickly undoes the wish, wishing to see her again but with the floor restored to how it was before. However, when he hears Catherine scream, he wishes for her to forget everything. Neil tells Ray everything, yet Ray refuses to believe him. Determined to prove it, Neil summons a skeleton, compelling it to reveal its identity. Neil makes the skeleton jump out of the window, and it lands in the headmaster's hands. Ray asks for another feat, and Neil conjures flowers, filling the entire room. Later, they bet on racehorses and win. Catherine is once again harassed by her stalker, who gives her the keys to a luxury apartment he rented for her. Meanwhile, Miss Pringle continues to worship Ray. Suddenly, a malfunction occurs in the galactic power, causing Neil's abilities to stop working, leaving him powerless. Catherine arrives at Neil's house and kisses him, unaware that her stalker is watching them from a distance. Meanwhile, the aliens restore the galactic power. Neil finds a note from Catherine saying she has gone to work. As he watches it rain, Neil, in a moment of impulse, wishes for the weather to be like in LA. It turns daytime into night. Realizing his mistake, he undoes it and words the wish more carefully. He then wishes for his clothes to be dressed on him, and they instantly appear. Meanwhile, at school, Miss Pringle has gathered a group of followers who now believe Ray to be their god. While having breakfast and reading a book, Neil uses his power to wish for Dennis, his dog, to be able to talk. To his surprise, Dennis starts asking for biscuits. Neil then wishes for Dennis to become more intelligent, but despite his newfound intellect, Dennis continues to ask for biscuits. Catherine arrives and confesses that she really likes Neil. However, in an awkward moment, Dennis shouts, "Shag her!" Neil quickly covers up by claiming it's the plumber. Dennis then starts declaring his love for Neil, leading Catherine to mistakenly believe that Neil is gay. In a flustered panic, Neil wishes for Dennis to become dumb again, but only for 5 minutes. Neil runs after Catherine but unexpectedly encounters her stalker. In a desperate attempt to escape, he wishes to be on the bus and vanishes. He then finds himself on top of the bus and quickly wishes to be inside, only to end up in the engine. Realizing his mistake, he wishes to be in the passenger area, and finally, he chases after Catherine. However, he is stopped by Ray, who intervenes before Neil can continue his pursuit. Ray asks Neil to stop Miss Pringle, so Neil wishes for Ray to become a duck to stop his incessant quacking. In a further attempt to silence him, Neil then wishes for Ray to turn into a sausage. As Miss Pringle arrives, she begins worshipping Ray's car. Seizing the moment, Neil meets up with Catherine and, with sincerity, tells her that he loves her. At the bakery, the girl mistakes Neil for stealing a sausage. In her anger, she smashes his head, takes the sausage from him, and demands that he pay for it. In response, Neil uses his powers to turn the sausage back into Ray. Seeing Miss Pringle approaching, Ray, now back to his human form, quickly runs away to avoid her. The aliens consider destroying Earth, believing Neil has no good intentions, but decide to follow the rules. Catherine finds her stalker at home, and Neil offers her to stay at his place. He then asks Dennis to pretend to be a dumb animal. Catherine arrives, and Neil serves her soup, which she finds to be the best thing she's ever tasted. He then confesses that earlier, he had been talking to Dennis, the dog, and reveals his powers to her. Catherine suggests that he needs help. The stalker, Grant, breaks in through the window and points a gun at Neil. In response, Neil wishes for all bullets to bounce off him. He dares Grant to shoot, then wishes for Grant to drop the gun. In a moment of frustration, Neil wishes for Grant's arm to break, causing him intense pain. Seeing Grant in pain, Neil heals his arm, then uses his powers to stick him to the ceiling, plaster him to the wall, and bury him headfirst into a pot. Afterward, he makes Grant stand in front of of him and confidently declares that he can do anything with a wave of his hand. Grant, in a fit of anger, hits Neil on the head. Meanwhile, at work, Catherine is offered a new office in exchange for sleeping with her colleague. Back at Neil's place, Grant ties Neil up and threatens to kill Dennis if Neil doesn't comply. He forces Neil to make a wish, and Neil, reluctantly, wishes for all English men to have big ears and webbed feet. Catherine rushes to Neil's apartment and finds Ray hiding in the closet. Ray explains that Miss Pringle wants him to prove he's immortal by rising from the dead. Together, they rush to the luxury apartment that Grant rented for Catherine. They find Miss Pringle waiting outside. Catherine and Ray flee from Miss Pringle and Grant, who forces Neil to wish for all British police to wear pink uniforms. They reach the apartment, where Grant makes Neil dress in a ridiculous outfit. He then orders Neil to set all traffic lights to be permanently green, causing chaos in the streets. As cars collide due to the permanently green traffic lights, Ray and Catherine arrive at the scene. Grant, still in control, forces Neil to wish for Catherine to fall in love with him and beg for him. Catherine then jumps on Grant, kissing him passionately as Neil watches in disbelief. Seizing the opportunity, Neil frees Dennis and turns Grant into a corgi. He also undoes his wish on Catherine, making her return to normal, and cancels all of Grant's wishes. Miss Pringle arrives with her followers, and Neil reverts her to her original state. As everyone leaves, they blame Neil for the chaos caused. Later, Neil attempts to talk to Catherine, confessing that he used his power to make her fall in love with him. He tells her that he truly loves her, but Catherine responds that she cannot love him because he has the ability to make her do anything he wants forever, which makes her feel controlled. Neil realizes the gravity of his mistake and decides to use his power for good. He wishes for world hunger, homelessness, and wars to end, and for global warming to be reversed. However, when he turns on the news, he sees unintended consequences. With the abundance of food, people have become obese, and the Sahara Desert has transformed into a new community to accommodate the influx of homes. As a result of his wish for no reason to declare war, nations have started fighting each other for no reason at all. The reversal of global warming has led to the return of the Ice Age. Realizing the consequences of his actions, Neil wishes for everything to return to the way it was before. Overwhelmed by the power he holds, he decides to end his life. Neil jumps off a bridge with Dennis leaping after him. Miraculously, both survive the fall. Witnessing this, the aliens decide to vaporize the planet. In a final act of defiance, Neil transfers his powers to Dennis, just as the aliens prepare to strike. Dennis, now holding the power, wishes for the source of the power to be destroyed forever. The beam aimed at Earth reverses course and destroys the aliens and all their colonized settlements. Neil meets Catherine and shows her that he has rid himself of the powers. He asks her to dinner, and she agrees. The film concludes with Grant, now in corgi form, asking Dennis to turn him back into a human, but Dennis refuses. Please like and subscribe the channel for more videos like these.